Nice to see everybody today. Our passage this morning is 2 Samuel chapter 2, and this is our Creative Commons disclaimer. We're using other people's things. We're doing it for non-profit use only. We're not selling this. The next slide asks those who are online to please donate online. We appreciate that if you would. And the next slide, it says James chapter 3, verse 16. Where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every evil thing. Now our passage today in 2 Samuel it contains several examples of this. And so that's where we're going, so that, the teachers told us, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Next slide, please. Now, if you look here, you see in the center, next slide, please. See, in the center of the map, we have Hebron. And in the purple, this map shows David's initial kingdom. And then all the way up in the upper right, we have a city that is on the other side of the Jordan. And that's where Saul's army retreated to. Now at this point in the narrative, David had been for a long time in Philistia with the king of Gath. They had sent him down to Ziklag to live because the people didn't want the Jewish people living among them, so they sent them to Ziklag. And as David was down there, he was waging war with the Amalekites. And when he brought the booty back, he didn't keep it for himself, but he came and he distributed it to the people of his family in Judah. So the Amalekites had been running in and raiding, and so David brought it all back. And so in essence, what he's doing is buying votes. That would be the modern day equivalent. So David had gone up to Gath, and the armies of the Philistines were getting ready to fight with Saul. And they didn't want David to fight with them, so David came back and he found that the Amalekites had raided his city, and he went and he brought all that stuff back. And in the meantime, the Philistines had gone north into Israel and had fought with Saul, routed his army, killed Saul, and killed Jonathan. And they were chased back all the way across the Jordan into what is modern day Jordan. And David came up and lived in Hebron. So this is the setting of the narrative at this point. Now I want to give you, next slide please, I want to give you a little upfront cast of characters. So we have a divided area. We have the northern part is called Israel, the southern part is called Judah. And so on Israel's side, we have Saul was the son of Kish, and the current king at this point in our story is Saul's son Ishbosheth, who is also sometimes translated, depending on what version you have, is Ishbaal. And the supreme commander of the army, actually the defeated army of Israel, was run by Abner. And what Abner did was he installed Ishbosheth, who was probably a minor, and Abner was ruling as a regent in place of his nephew, because Abner was in fact Kish's brother, and so it was all in the family on that side. And so Abner is de facto king, but Ishbosheth is actually the king. On the other side, we have King David. And in this story, we have the sons of Zeruiah, who is David's sister. Now, it's very unusual that the Old Testament mentions a female's name, but this female is so important to the story because she has three sons who become very important in the kingdom of Judah. And so it doesn't mention their father at all because he wasn't blood related, apparently, to David. And so it mentions his sister, Zeruiah. And so Joab, the son of Zeruiah, is the nephew of David, and he is the supreme commander of the army of Judah. So prior to this point, the Israelites are fighting the Amalekites, they're fighting the Philistines, they're fighting the Canaanites, and they're all trying to get these other people conquered. Now we come to a place in the story where the Jewish people, the Israelites, begin to fight themselves. And so there's a really change in attitude here about what's going on. So let me see the next slide, please. David inquired of the Lord, he's in Hebron, this is modern day Hebron that you see, shall I go up to any of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said to him, go up. And David said, to which shall I go up? And he said, to Hebron. Now you have to understand that David did have as a benefit, he had the prophet Gad with him, and he had the high priest that survived when Saul killed all of the other priests. And so he had the ability to consult with the religious leaders, and he wanted to know if he should go up into this area. He's already bribed them with the spoil that he had won against the Amalekites, and God tells him to go to Hebron. Now this was a very practical place for him to go because it was the place that was given to Caleb, in the story of the 12 spies, and his wife Abigail was from that area, and so he had this political marriage which kind of ingratiated him to the area. So God told him to go up to that place, and that's where he wrote the elegy that we talked about last week. Next slide, please. Then the people of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. Now you have to understand, in reading the Bible at this particular place and in future places, the house of Judah and the house of Israel are now separate. They're two different countries. They're ruled by different people. Judah is the more religious, following the things of God. The Israelites are more heathenized. And so this is the first place we find the house of Judah. Now the idea of a house is, in Hebrew and in Greek both, it's the family that lives in the house. So when it says the house of Judah, it means Judah and all of his descendants. And when it says the house of David, it means all of the descendants of David. And so this is the first time we find the phrase house of Judah in the Bible. So from now on in the Old Testament, when it says Israel, it's talking about the north. When it says Judah, it's talking about the south. And there's only a short period of time, the lifetime of David, or part of the lifetime of David, and the lifetime of Solomon, where they were together. All the rest of the time they were separate. After Solomon, the north split off and it became Israel and it was Judah again. So just during this period of time is the only time that David actually ruled over all of it. But this doesn't happen yet for 7 years. Now, let's go back. Let's go back to 1 Samuel chapter 16. Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. And Samuel then set out and went to Ramah. How many years ago do you think this was? It's way back when David was tending his father's sheep and he was the youngest one in the family. And you remember the story, the oldest son, Eliab, came and God said to Samuel, this is not this one. And the second son came, no, it's not this one. He goes through the 9 sons, and then Samuel says to Jesse, isn't there another one? And he said, yeah, the youngest one, he's out tending the sheep. And so he was brought in, and Samuel anointed him as king. Years and years and years and years previously. I can just imagine him going to high school and saying, I'm going to be king someday. God told me I'm going to be king. Do you think he was ever tempted to say that? I I guarantee you he probably was. He's had it in his heart since he was a young boy, because Samuel, and you don't question the word of Samuel. His words didn't fall to the ground. Remember, people would go up and ask him, and his words did not fall to the ground. He had the reputation of telling the truth and being spot on when it comes to hearing from God. So all of the things that happened to him from that point to this point took years. And he's refused to kill Saul, even though he had the opportunity to do so several times. And so now, what's he thinking? Time is right. Time is right. Throughout the Bible, when God said something to somebody, and I think this is probably true in almost every case, the people who heard the prophetic word of what was going to happen in their life tried to fulfill it themselves. And it didn't ever work out. Oh, Abraham, you're going to have a child, and he will be, his descendants will be more than the stars of the sky. And it didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. And so he gets the idea, okay, well, obviously this is my wife's fault, so I'm going to just sleep with Hagar, my wife's maid, and she can have kids, and it'll be cool because that's okay in her culture. And so she has a child, but it's not the promised child. And it wasn't until years and years and years after that, it wasn't until 12 years after that, that Isaac was born by Sarah, a miraculous birth. He tried to fulfill it himself, and he ended up with Arabs. They're all circumcised too. They're all descended from Abraham as well. They're cousins. They're stepbrothers is what they are. The Jews and the Arabs, stepbrothers. Way, way back. So here, at this particular time, David is tempted by his own ambition to fulfill the plan. And you'll be able to see in a little bit, it doesn't work out too well. Next slide, please. I guess we have to go one more slide. A schmoozer was sent to Shmooze. You like that word, Kelly? It's not, it comes from Yiddish, but it's not an exactly Yiddish word. It's an English, and it's been Englishized. It's a little bit different. David sent messengers to the people of Jabesh Gilead. Now, those of you who are here know that earlier in the narrative concerning the kingdom of Saul, there was a problem, and the bad guy said that he would let them live if he could poke one eye out of every male. And the leader of Jabesh said, well, let's see if we have somebody that can come and help us. Saul went and helped them. And so Jabesh Gilead is a place where Saul is considered to be one of the greatest people ever. Politically, he helped them. He came with his army. He drove off the enemies. People didn't lose their eye, which means that they still had perspective. One eye means you have no perspective. So he sends messengers to Jabesh Gilead, and he says, may you be blessed by the Lord because you showed loyalty to Saul your Lord and buried him. Because in the previous passage it says that Jabesh Gilead went and got Saul's body off of the wall where they had hung it, and got Jonathan's body and brought him back and gave him a proper burial. And so David sends messengers to this area because this is an area that he's thinking that he's going to need in order to rule in his new kingdom. And he schmoozes. In his own area, he's already brought the money back and kind of bribed those people. And now they've made him king. Next slide, please. Judah has made him king. And so it says, may the Lord show you steadfast love and your faithfulness to you. I too will reward you because you've done this thing. Let your hands be strong and be valiant, for Saul your Lord is dead. And by the way, the house of Judah has anointed me king. And between the lines there, it means everything is going to be fulfilled what Samuel said, and you should anoint me king as well. But there's difference in politics between Jabesh Gilead and Hebron, just like there's a difference in politics between New York City and the rest of New York. Different culture, different altogether. Hebron is in the south. Israel is in the north. They have different geography. They have different history. They've been there a long time since the Exodus. And so he doesn't go with them, but he sends these messengers to go up to this area. And what do you think happened then? Next slide, please, quickly. Basically saying, if you're looking for a new king, I'm your guy. The next one. The next sentence starts with, but. But with one T. But. There's some issues. You know, Hugh Turner, my father's friend, used to say you can always count on an attorney to look out for their own best interest. It's kind of a joke, but the truth is that all people can be counted on to look out for their own best interest. Okay, the town says we're going to put sewer in here and it's going to cost the church and thousands of dollars. You have to oppose it. It's not in our interest. Now, somebody else might have needed sewer, and it would be their interest to get sewer and to get the people that don't need sewer to pay for it. That's how all politics is. No, we need to give money for this and this and this and this and this and this and this. Where are you going to get it? Well, we're going to get it from the rich. Well, the rich don't like that. It's not in their interest. They want to keep what they earn. It's all about self-interest in any political situation, anytime, anywhere. People go for their own enlightened self-interest. I don't want to pay any more taxes. Pay enough taxes. But some people need help. And it's in their interest that I pay more taxes. And so here we have the big word, but. David is thinking that everything's going to be cool because God's called him and he's going to have a ministry and the kingdom of God is going to be established and he's going to be the king. And it's God's will that he become the king. And even though that's true, there's still a but. Next slide, please. But Abner, the son of Ner, who was Saul's uncle, commander of Saul's army. Now, did Abner know David? Yes. David, in years past, had been the commander of Saul's army. David was married to Saul's daughter. David was best friends with Saul's son, Jonathan. And the uncle was there and fighting in the army the whole time. And Abner knew David and he knew Joab. By the way, the Ab in there is father. Abner means my father is Ner, and Joab means Jehovah is my father, when you see the Ab in both names. But Abner, the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbaal, or Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim, which is that city that I showed you in the upper right on the map across the Jordan because they were escaping from the Philistines. This all happened within a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. But Abner had made this young descendant of Saul king over Gilead, the Asherites, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and over all Israel. So it is not in Abner's best interest that David become king. It is not in anybody's best interest in the family of Saul that David become king. And Saul knew this. Even though Jonathan, the son of Saul, had said to David, "You be first in the kingdom, I'll be second in the kingdom." And they had this thing all worked out on how it was going to work. But then Jonathan ends up getting killed the same as Saul. And so everything is in upheaval. There's war between the Philistines and Israel. There's war between David and the Amalekites. And the Israelites are rousted over across the Jordan Valley. And David comes up and he becomes king in Judah among his own people. And now he's trying to schmooze the people in Jabesh Gilead. But in the meantime, Abner has appointed another king. And it's not going to be easy to pull the nation of Israel out of the hands of Abner, because Saul had been king all those years and had done a lot of things for the people. He had done some good things. And the people there liked him, and the people there were grieving the fact that he had been killed and that Jonathan had been killed. And so David has a call of God on his life. However, it isn't working out because they're conflicting self-interests. Now this works in a church setting, because what we're talking about now is not Israelites fighting the heathen. Now we're talking about Israelites fighting Israelites. Christians fighting Christians, so to speak. So David isn't up there in Jabesh Gilead, but he sends Joab there and something happens. And then this next one is at 2 Samuel 2. Yeah. This is just a parenthesis. Ishbaal, or Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 when he began to reign. He reigned 2 years, but the house of Judah followed David. The time David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. So that's just a little historical note that somebody put in there. It's not part of the narrative. It's just what the editor put in so that we could understand. Next slide. Abner the son of Ner and the servants of Ishbaal, son of Saul, went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon. And Joab the son of Zeruiah and the servants of David went out and met them at the pool of Gibeon. Where is this? It's right near Jabesh Gilead. The northern army had come down to this place of support. The southern army had come up to the same place to try to schmooze. And they both need water because it's an arid place, and if you have an army, it takes a lot of water, and so they end up at the spring of life, so to speak, one on one side and one on the other. Now, this is what it looks like from the side. But the next slide gives you an idea of what this pool looks like, and you can go there today and see it if you want. It's a huge circular carving in stone with steps that go down and down and down and curve around. And in the bottom there's an aquifer. Good, clean, cold water, good place to be if you're in the arid northern Israel. And so David's army is on one side, Abner's army is on the other side. I don't need to tell you that this is going to be a problem. David doesn't know it yet, but he's not going to be king right away. He has selfish ambition, but Abner also has selfish ambition. There's actually other pictures if you want to look this up. Just type in pool of Gibeon, and there's pictures of it down inside and stuff, and where the water is, and so there they are. Next slide. Abner said to Joab, they knew each other. They fought together in the earlier days. Let the young man come forward and have a contest. Joab said, let them come forward. Okay, who started this? Abner started it. So they came forward and were counted as they passed by, 12 for Benjamin, which was the tribe of Saul and part of Israel, and Ishbaal, son of Saul, and 12 for the servants of David. Okay, let's just take a dozen from my side and a dozen for your side, and let them fight it out, and we won't have a big war. We'll just see who wins 12 on 12, and whoever wins, wins. Has this ever worked in history? Probably not. But apparently that's what they tried to do. Next verse, please. Each grasped his opponent by the head. I think some translations say by the beard. Rick, you'd be in trouble there. And his opponent's side, and they fell down together. Therefore that place is called Helkath Hazurium, which is at Gibeon. They killed each other. The 12 killed each other. Nobody survived on either side. What about the mothers of those people? What about their fathers and their brothers and their sisters and their children? You know, the kingdom of God is not really designed to be killing each other. Although historically, you know, Catholics and Protestants have killed each other. So they named the place the Field of Swords. There's probably a plaque up there, although I didn't find one. I didn't look that closely, but I imagine at that place near Gibeon, there's probably a plaque that says this is the Field of Swords. And notice that they each sacrificed the lives of somebody else. I mean, if you're going to really have a contest, then Abner and Joab should have probably gone at it, but the problem is that Abner was an old man and Joab was a young man, and so he probably didn't want to do that. So this is the beginning of the first civil war among the people of God. It's the Charleston Harbor event. It's the sinking of the ship that started the Spanish-American War, the bombing of the ship in the Gulf of Tonkin. It's the beginning of a war. Next one. I think that that's a slide I should have deleted. Go ahead, please. Next one. I moved them both on this slide to make it easier. The battle was fierce, and Abner and the men of Israel were beaten. The three sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Now, Asahel was swift of foot as a wild gazelle. That is hyperbole. He didn't really run as fast as a deer, but they said he was a track star. I was on track over in Bloomfield for about 3 weeks. I was in one event, the 440 relay. I don't even know if they have 440 relay anymore. It's probably in meters now. And I came in dead last, and Colleen Lawler laughed at me, and that was the end of my track career. Ricky knows Carol. The girl I speak of, she was really pretty.
You are funny to watch.
Am I? But our friend Paul Morrow, he could run 7, 8, 9 miles.
And he smoked cigarettes.
One time there was this big farm kid, and Morrow went up and kicked him in the butt and ran. If the kid ever caught him, he would have killed him. It would have popped his head like a pimple, but he couldn't catch him because he was on cross country, and he was number 2 in the county. There was a kid in Canandaigua that was faster, but he was a year older, and when he graduated, our friend Paul became the number one cross-country runner. And so this guy was a runner. And his brother Joab is the head of the army, and his other brother is there with David. They're three close brothers, and they're all on the same page with David. They're all from Judah. And so it says, Asahel pursued Abner, turning neither to the right nor to the left as he followed him. Why did he want to do that? He wanted the reputation as being the person who killed the leader of the Israelite army. He didn't care about the other soldiers there. He's chasing Abner. And he's running after Abner and running after Abner and running after Abner. Next slide, please. And Abner looked back and said, "Is it you, Asahel?" And he said, "Yes, it is." And Abner said, "Turn to your right or to your left, seize one of the young men and take his spoil. Just kill one of my guys instead." See, this guy has no care for other people's life at all. And Asahel would not turn away from following Abner. And Abner said, "Turn away from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How could I show my face to your brother Joab?" But he refused to turn away. So Abner struck him in the stomach with the butt of his spear so that it came out his back, and he fell there and died where he lay. And all those who came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died stood still. I don't want to kill you. I have too much respect for your brother, and you know, there's going to be relations between the two countries, and how am I going to face your brother if I kill you? And the young man has so much selfish ambition to be the war hero. And it's really a fool's errand, because this guy, this older man, is a seasoned warrior. And he didn't want to, apparently. But when push came to shove, Abner killed him. So this kind of selfish ambition is not good either. Oh, I want to be the war hero. I want the ticker-tape parade. And it cost him his life. See, everybody in this story has, they have selfish ambition. Everybody. So the other soldiers who come by, because Asahel is all the way up in the front and everybody is behind, he's running and they're marching, and when they came to the spot where the boy was, they would stand still and say, "It's terrible." He had so much potential. Next slide, please. But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner. As the sun was going down, they came to the hill at Ammah, which lies before Giah and on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon. And the Benjaminites rallied around Abner and formed a single band, and they took their stand on the top of a hill. All the people came to and they protected him. They're on the top of the hill. The Judean army is coming after them, and they're taking their stand. It's just about dark. The sun is about to go down, and it looks like they're about to be massacred. You can see on the map, that's the Dead Sea there that looks like sea, and then there's a little dot up there. So they need to get across, the army needs to get across the Jordan Valley over on the other side, but it's dark, and it looks like they're kind of trapped. They've got the high ground, but the army of King David is coming. Next slide. Then Abner called to Joab, "Is the sword to keep devouring forever? Do you not know that the end will be bitter? How long will it be before you order your people to turn from the pursuit of their kinsmen?" I started this war I didn't realize what was going to happen. But you are waging war against your own people. And you need to turn around and go. And Joab bought it. Next slide. Joab said, as God lives, if you had not spoken, the people would have continued to pursue their kinsmen, not stopping until morning. If you hadn't asked me to turn around, I would have followed you until the break of day and destroyed you. But since you said, better not kill your extended family, I'll stop. Now, I think this is, next slide, please. I think this is really rather amazing because somewhere on the road back there is his dead brother. So, next slide. Maybe I don't have a next slide. It should be, is there one? No. It should say, where selfish ambition exists, there is every other evil thing. That's true in the kingdom of God. And we can't be fighting with each other. We can't be killing each other. What do you get out of this one?
I think the theme here, hold up. This is a dangerous thing to get in my head.
Just remember whatever you say is going out live stream.
Gotcha.
And you can't be muted.
I think that the theme here for me is just because you're called by God, just because you've been given promises and favor, that you need to permit your Lord to write the story. You see, even with Moses called by God, he killed the Egyptian. You know.
That 40 years is a fugitive.
And Joseph, had the dream that he'd rule over his brothers. And the first thing he did is go tell his brothers. You see how that turned out. So it was interesting. I was talking to your firstborn this morning about where he is in his life and what he's been called to do. And it was pleasant to me that his patience to allow God to unfold what he had already promised instead of seizing it himself. And because you always run into significant trouble. I've seen it in my own life, even in coming back to New York. I had ideas in my head that I know God had put there. But I was anxious, I was ambitious, I was optimistic, but I wasn't patient. And I was a bit presumptuous in some ways. So, yeah, that's what I take from it, that God has, he's not going to desert you.
Well, that's exactly what I was trying to get across, so I'm glad that's what you got out of it.
Yeah, well, okay.
So what I got out of it is, I think it's normal for all of us to have ambitions. We all have ambitions. I'm not sure that it's more dangerous to not have God's goal in mind or to have his goal in mind and allow your own ambitions to reshape your actions.
Anyone else? Thank you, Gene. Wait a minute, microphone. Yeah. Yeah, it has to be, it's running.
Did you get some water?
Pardon me?
What I didn't get out of it is, did either side get any water?
Well, I'm sure they did. Anyone else? It's quite a ways down. I believe they dug it out like that because it looks like it's, perfect.
So from a war perspective, the first group that went down, he would then give the other group the high ground. So if you go down to get water first, you're giving the high ground to your enemy.
Interesting. Hey, did you guys have fun in Sunday school, children's church? No, huh? Anyone else? Happy spring. Have a great day. May God bless you.